John, welcome back to the show.
Welcome. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to take you back to early in the Saratoga meet. Friend or foe is unbeaten in a trio of sprint races. And you join us on the show as you're about to ask him to stretch out and go 2 turns for the first time in the Jim Dandy, followed by the Travers. John, in retrospect, was that a bit too much to ask of him at that point?
Not really. I thought he was well primed for the race in the Jim Dandy, and the Jim Dandy was actually his first attempt around 2 turns. He got banged around a little bit, but actually, look who was right next to him in the finish. You had Fly Down and Fleet Express, 2 horses that came back and ran huge in the Travers. I mean, they were right next to us within a length of one another. And it was my first time ever going 2 turns. Those horses had the experience of a 2-turn race maybe 2 or 3 times before running in the Jim Dandy. So I was actually pretty optimistic that we were going to move forward in the next race, Travers. The horse was training very well going into it, and it didn't take long to realize that we had no chance, because he basically was the victim of a big traffic jam going into the first turn and got knocked way out into the middle of the first turn. Not a length or 2 pass wide, but the tune of about 8 or 9 pass. And there's just no way that a horse can run that whole first turn at 8 or 9 wide and have any chance against that level of competition. It was pretty much over before we got anywhere. And it was just disheartening, because the horse was doing really well but never had any chance. He came back, he had some cuts on his legs, and they proceeded to get infected, and it just kind of knocked him through a bit of a loop. And we had contemplated coming to the Pennsylvania Derby, but it just wasn't enough time. So our next goal was the Empire Classic.
Well, as you mentioned, he returned in the Empire Classic, and he returned with a vengeance. Here he is in front, dominating that race. John, was this the type of performance that you felt all along he was capable of?
Absolutely. I mean, it's nice to see him do it, but the horse has always showed me that he's a brilliant mover. He works great in the morning. He won his first 3 races pretty convincingly, and he really had some excuses in the other 2 races. Now, every time you go out for a dance, you wonder who's going to show up. The horse has been lightly raced. It was only a 6th start running against more seasoned horses, but he basically ran a very dominating race and won with some gas still in the tank. I mean, he really never got after him. He turned his stick over not once. He kind of showed him a little right-handed stick, and he basically opened up by 5 and ran very fast. The time was 1:46.4, which was the fastest 1 1/8 run at Belmont in 2007 Rachel Alexander's Mother Goose.
Alex Solis rode him for the first time for you that day, John. What did he have to say to you after the race?
After the race, what did he say?
Yeah.
Wow. He said, "This is one nice horse," and he did that very well. I mean, he really came back, and I think he went forward off of that race from a mental standpoint. He came out of that race. He never missed an ode. His maturity level seemed to improve from my perspective. I think he's actually put on some weight and got a little bigger and stronger, as some of these 3-year-olds do as they approach the end of the season. And, I'm quite excited. I think this horse has got a future, and just because he's a New York bred by a sire that really hasn't had a top-name horse, you might get a little discouraged. But, he, to me, if he was by AP Indy, I'd be over the moon. But he's by a son of AP Indy, and I think he's got a big career ahead of him.
John, originally after the victory in the Empire Classic, you spoke of the possibility of putting him away for the rest of the year until Gulfstream and running there. In the end, why'd you decide on the Cigar Mile?
You know, I think the one-turn races, he's been undefeated in every one-turn race he's run in. And, you know, sometimes when horses are good, you need to run 'em. I mean, we can't sit on the sidelines when your horse is doing well, and he's done well, and I think he deserves a chance at this race. To me, I wouldn't trade places with anybody in the race, and I know there are a lot of other proven horses out there, but to me, I think my horse has got the most upside potential.
All right, let's talk about the Cigar Mile. You're turning back from a pace-controlling effort in the Empire Classic, going 9 furlongs, to Grade 1 Open Company, going a flat mile. You are very nicely drawn outside. Draw up, I guess, the perfect scenario, perfect pace setup for Friend or Foe in the Cigar Mile.
Well, the way I've kind of been picking apart a little bit the PPs, and the way I look at it is that some of these sprinters that have run their best races on or close to the pace, especially Girolamo, he's in the one hole. You would figure he's got to come out forwardly. I just don't think there's any way that horse is going to do anything but try to show some speed and get some position. And his entry mate, Vineyard Taven, if you look at his form, you know, all his good performances are when he gets himself clear and comfortable. So, I don't know, it's an entry, and I see these two horses kind of being out in front and trying to slow the pace scenario down. And I see myself sitting right behind them, and it's just a matter of whether they want to go a little quicker or a little slower. It will depend on the way they're setting up their early fractions as to where we'll be. I mean, we've got as much speed as anybody if we want to be there. But, you know, we're going a mile, and I think these guys that are going to try to slow it down as best they can. The other horses that show speed at 2 turns, a horse like Hainesfield, I don't think he's quick enough to be anywhere in the pace setting here. Musket Man is going to be coming from off the pace, and same with Soaring Empire and Brabone. You know, they're late running sprinters. I don't see them involved in the early pace scenario. A horse like Jersey Town, he might show a little in the middle of the pack, but it seems like if he goes too fast early, he hasn't really been finishing that well. So you know, I think it sets up pretty nice for us. We have 2 horses that we're running in Breeders' Cup sprint races, and we'll be tracking on the outside, and hopefully we get a good first run at them and stay clear of getting banged around.
John, you confident that Friend or Foe will allow Alex to place him wherever he needs to be?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this horse is, he's not ranked by any means. And Alex has been working him in the mornings, and he's actually done a really nice job. In his last breed, he just, you know, went off in 14 and came home at 101 and change. And I went the last half mile in 47. Now, this horse has never really been a rank horse. I don't see that as being a problem. I think he's going to ask him to kind of come out. He's not a horse that if you ask him for something leaving there to get a good early position, he's not going to try to run off 22 fractions 44. I think nobody else is going to try to do that anyway. I imagine he's very deceiving, even though he can go pretty fast and he can look pretty easy while he's doing it.
John, very early on in his career, you told us you felt that Friend or Foe was a very high-quality racehorse. I imagine you haven't changed that opinion very much?
No, I haven't. I think the horse has got a lot of future promise. When you look, I was just kind of looking through his Ragusan figures here. For a horse that's so lightly raced, he's done very well. I guess the horse like Brabone to me would probably be the horse that I would be most concerned about in the race. His figures looked pretty good when you go back to some of his earlier races. In his last race, he ran a 5, but if you go back to the prior year, he had run a 2, and Musket Man has run a 2 and a 1 in a couple of his races, but he's trying to do the Breeders' Cup back to this race, which I think is kind of difficult in many cases, as the history has shown. And we ran a 3. We ran a 3 last time, and you would certainly say he wasn't all in to do it, at least in my opinion.
John, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just think he stacks up as a horse that's going in the right direction at the right time, and I don't know. I couldn't be more excited about a race in a long time than this. We'll kind of see how he's going to handle a little different running tactic than he got in the Empire Classic. He's obviously not going to be on the front end, or at least I would certainly not think he would be on the front end in a leisurely pace scenario. I think he'll be tracking like he did in his first 2 races.
Well, John, as always, we appreciate your time very much. Thank you so much for having joined us this morning on Down the Stretch, and all the best later this afternoon with Friend or Foe in the Grade 1 Cigar Mile.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
John Kimmel, ladies and gentlemen, the conditioner of the outstanding state bred Friend or Foe.